This Hanukkah story, it's really so useful. There's a lot of amazing things that we can talk about. There's this question of lights. There's the idea of fighting for something you believe in. There's an idea of how do we stay to our truths and make a space so that people can observe and be free. And this whole idea of Chanukah comes from this connection in the word about dedication. It's also connected to education. Chinuch is education. But if you think about what is it that we dedicate, who do we want to be in Chanukah, I think that is a question that is always going to come up. And at different times in our lives, in different periods of history, we're going to feel it really differently. Sometimes I remember talking about Chanukah and freedom and thinking about Soviet Jews and the freedom for the refuseniks. There are other times we were talking about civil liberties and religious freedom and separation of church and state, and to make sure these institutions are going to be protected. Well, there's other things that I think some of us have been feeling. I remember when I first got here, the very first Chanukah, I told a story about Montana. I've never been to Montana. I can't even tell you where Montana is on a map. I'm total New Yorker. Very parochial. I don't know where I live. But there's this place in Montana where there was lots of anger and hatred that was going around. And it was becoming, people thought it was becoming contagious, but it never did. And at one point, there was a family, the Schnitzers. And through the 5-year-old's window that was decorated with dreidels and a Chanukiah, somebody threw a brick, a cinder block. And there were other kinds of hateful acts going on in Billings, Montana, of all places. And it seemed like it was growing and growing and growing, and people who were filled with hate were showing up. And there was a woman who talked to her pastor and said, we should do something about this. Well, what can we do? There's a lot of people who feel like something is important, but we don't actually follow up with anything. And so the pastor started talking to other pastors until little by little, lots of folks had little cutouts of a Chanukiah. And they wanted to put it up on their windows, and some of them did. And the first ones that did, this one woman in the newspaper, she was Catholic. She felt really strong about putting up a Chanukiah, the Chanukah menorah, up in her window. And then once she did, she felt a little vulnerable that she never had that feeling before. How do I put it out there that I might be a target somehow? That people can take that anger, that hate, that unfairness and bring it towards me. And then she thought further to herself and says, well, what happens if somebody said, I shouldn't put a tree up? Remember, she was Catholic. Maybe the Christmas tree or the wreath. What happens if something that's important to my family we can't put up? How should I feel about it? So she kept it up. And little by little, the few people became tens. And the local newspaper put a Chanukah menorah, the Chanukiah, in a full-page ad for people to color. And then all of a sudden, the tens became hundreds. And they had almost, at some point, perhaps up to 10,000 people in Billings, Montana, where maybe there was 100 Jews, putting up this Chanukah menorah in their windows. That is bringing light into the world. There's another story that goes back, and Holly, I was telling Holly about this, and she was like, there's lots of challenges that aren't here alone about how we look at somebody else. But once upon a time, when we were feeling so oppressed in Europe, for good reason, the Danes made sure that their Jewish citizens were going to be getting out safely. They resisted the Nazi occupation as long as they could. They did. It was pretty amazing. And when somebody who was involved in working with Germany heard that there was going to be a secret plan to take of Denmark's Jews, a small number, several thousand, and send them to camps, there was a huge organization underground that started with police and people in business collecting money and engaging people who are fishermen to take people to, across the water and get them out of Denmark. Now, the fishermen couldn't give up their work for the day. They needed to work. So they were paid people were taken care of, and whatever the number is, maybe 7,000 or so Jews were brought out during darkness out of Denmark to safety. And when the war is over, they were almost all of them were able to return to their homes. The fellow citizens protected them because they believed in their country and they believed in freedom of religion, and they were going to stand up. Well, that's bringing light into the world. It was just a few weeks ago that there was this terrible incident in Pittsburgh. Just awful. And I don't think American Jews felt this kind of challenge to who we are probably for decades. I didn't grow up, I take that back. After I was ordained as a rabbi, my main sermon wasn't anti-Semitism. We were getting more and more comfortable. Studies were showing that anti-Semitism was going down. People loved Streisand. Everything was fine. Spielberg's good too. Like, we were in and we were making it. But now we're feeling vulnerable again. And what happens? It wasn't thousands, but to have 100 or so people who aren't part of our synagogue community line up from the parking lot to our front door after Pittsburgh, lining up and saying, we're supporting you. These folks from the local Boulder area who we don't even know, who just wanted to step forward and say, we're here. And they lined the corridor all the way to the entrance. Person after person that I was greeting that Friday night when services, this is great. You guys are here. I'm loving it. But we had maybe 500 or so people into the other rooms. All of these people who are here because we needed to come together. And everybody walking into our sanctuary said, do you know what's going on out there, with tears in their eyes? That's bringing light into the world. So I made a joke that wasn't really a joke. In the beginning, it was really hot over here. I had to take off my jacket. It was uncomfortable. But joking aside, to see all of this light at a dark time in the world, and there is a dark time in the world, but to see all of this light and to see your lights in front of me, celebrating Hanukkah together, ready to have some latkes again, trying to tell the story of what does this mean, and it's a complicated story. There's also difficult parts to the story, but our job is to bring light into the world, to bring light into this space, to bring light into each other's lives. Friends, we need that. We need you. We need you to light your Chanukiah here, and we need you to do it at home. We need to light Shabbat candles here, and we need to light it at home. We need to help figure out how do we bring the light of Jewish tradition into greater spaces and let other people also get to know us and share in bringing light together. I think we can do that. I think it's good to get out of our own way and figure out how can you be that shamash and light another candle. It can go on after, it's very smoky. It can go on after Hanukkah. So, what is it that I want to share? What I want us to leave with? May it be your will, God of mercy, holy and sacred one, that our Hanukkah candles shine a bright light, spreading truth and not lies, spreading peace and not hate, spreading love and not bigotry. It's time to reclaim the idea of the Maccabees going into battle to defend their people. Not only that we can't wait for miracles, but to be God's partner in creating the miracles of our own. And those miracles are love and understanding and respect and helping people to feel safe and to be heard, and to create institutions in the synagogue and beyond that have room for everybody who wants to enter. That is how we dedicate and rededicate and rededicate and rededicate our Hanukkah candles and ourselves. Let's move to conclude.